Hello everyone, so I'm Mike Bluestone, the National Chairman of AJEX, the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women. And I'm here with my deputy, Dan Fox, and we're going to have a discussion now as part of National Armed Forces Week, just to explore a bit about why Dan is a reservist in HM Armed Forces, and also to talk a little bit about AJEX and what it means to you, Dan. So, Dan, we're no strangers to each other. And we go back a few years now. We've worked together with the Armed Forces Jewish community before I took up this role. And I know that you've been a very keen Army reservist for a number of years now. So I'd like to hear from you. What motivated you to join the reserves? How long have you been in? And what do you get out of it, essentially?
So I think initially it was really a sort of seeking a sense of purpose. I've been working in my professional civilian career for several years when I finally sort of stumbled across the Army Reserve as an option of something else to do, of a way of contributing, of a way of improving myself, learning new skills and really pushing myself and taking myself out of my comfort zone whilst also making a contribution to public service. This was also the time when, as a nation and with our allies, we were at full pelt and full stretch in the middle of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there was also the temptation of some potential adventure as well. And indeed, 3 years after I signed up, I deployed to Afghanistan for a tour of duty.
What does it mean to you? I mean, to be a Jewish member of the Armed Forces today, because I know that you deployed for, I think it was 6 months in Afghanistan, and how has that sort of impacted on your experiences in the military?
So before I deployed to Afghanistan, I was already involved with the Armed Forces Jewish community, and the AFJC and also the Majesty's Committee for Jewish Forces was hugely supportive. I remember receiving care packages. I remember being put in touch with other Jewish servicemen and women that were out there, which is just that extra little bit of sort of personal support and boost to morale that can make all the difference on a tour of duty. I also remember, perhaps actually one of my fondest memories at the time on the sort of Jewish community side was receiving letters from some school children at a Jewish school in Manchester, who AFJC had put me in touch with them, and me writing back to them, and the teacher then getting in touch to say how good their reaction had been to it, and everything else. So it's just that, you know, the military is a community. It is a family. The Jewish community is its own family and community as well. And to be able to merge those and have those two overlap has simply strengthened my connection to both.
Now, obviously, we've worked together delivering talks about the fact that today there are still hundreds of Jews, men and women, serving in HM Armed Forces. Sometimes people seem surprised to hear that. Why do you think they're surprised?
That's a good question. I suppose that for our generation now in the Jewish community, it's not perhaps a common career choice. We're way past the time of national service. We're way past the time of those, many of whom will say with us, of course, but those who served in World War II. And you know, it's a small community. It's an aspirational community, and careers in the military, I think wrongly, have not always seemed to fit with what a nice Jewish boy or girl should do with their lives. In my experience, this has been a mistake to see it that way. The military is hugely aspirational, and it's hugely important that an organisation such as the military reflects the country that it serves. And the Jewish community is such a high-profile part of our nation that it should be a high-profile part of our military as well, throughout all branches of service and throughout all ranks and commissions.
One of the things that I'm committed to is to making sure that AJEX continues, that it has longevity, despite the changing demographic within the Association. And it's important that we have young blood coming through the system. So how have you perceived AJEX? And now you're my deputy, you will eventually succeed me. And how do you view AJEX? And do you think that your view of AJEX is the one that's viewed by all current Jewish servicemen?
So I think that traditionally, as we talk about in the speeches, within the serving members of the armed forces themselves who are Jewish, we have the Armed Forces Jewish Community, which is, if you like, sort of our shop floor, almost our sort of trade union organisation. And we have the Jewish Committee for Her Majesty's Forces, which is the official MOD-devolved organisation that takes care in leading on the administration of Jewish soldiers. And endorsing the chaplains and everything else. And those organisations always work very well together within the military. I think AJEX has been seen as the veterans organisation. It's been seen as an old organisation and a more traditional organisation. Indeed, its history reflects that. You know, it was the successful organisations were founded in the wake of World War I. But as you know, what's happened recently is that in fact all three of those organisations have begun working more closely together. AJEX is becoming much more of an organisation that supports really that sort of cradle to grave military careers through from, well, not cradle, but certainly from a young age through from cadets all the way through to veterans, and Jewish veterans are some of the oldest and most distinguished in the country. And so what we're seeing is certainly perceptions changing. I think the most important one for me, actually, especially as a reservist, is the support that is growing from within those organisations and from within AJEX for families of serving members as well. It's not easy being a family member for a serving soldier, sailor, airman or woman. In the reserves we have particular challenges alongside our civilian life as well. And AJEX, again, with the other organisations, positioning itself as a family and as a welfare organisation is incredibly important.
Talking of younger people, we've had the development in recent months of the establishment of an Army Cadet Force, the largest Jewish school, of the JFS school. How do you think this is going to impact on the future of Jewish service in the armed forces, and indeed on the future of AJEX?
So the cadet forces, I'm very familiar with. I was a cadet instructor. I never did it as a kid myself, but I was a cadet instructor, and that's actually one of the things that brought me into the orbit of the reserve and regular forces. The cadet forces are an excellent organisation and an excellent way for young people to challenge themselves, to learn, to make friendships, and to really get a sense of achievement that I don't think you can get from many other organisations. Although we do, of course, have in our own community the JLGB. There are other uniformed youth organisations as well, and anybody who's familiar with those should really see the Army Cadet Force as akin to those sorts of organisations in terms of how it helps a young person develop and learn. What the Cadet Forces also do is that they are a reasonable simulation of army life. It's not the same by any stretch of the imagination, and nor should it be when we're talking about children. But in terms of the experience that you get, you can build an understanding of the armed forces and whether or not it is something that you would like to do as a career, whether in the regulars or in the reserves as well. So what I hope will happen with specific Jewish Cadet Force units now is that many of our young people in the region will take up the opportunity. And for those for whom it does feel right, for those for whom do enjoy it, for those who do want to find out a bit more, they will look to enhance that service through service in the regular and reserve forces when the time is right for that.
That's brilliant. Dan, that's really great. Thanks very much for talking with us today.
Always my pleasure.